What's up, guys? Dan from the Devil's Word Shop from hot, sweaty Chicago. I love it. I like doing videos that are kind of off the cuff and spontaneous, but I always think of things after I'm done that I've posted that I wish I had said. So I'm just going to read something that I wrote. It's about 10 minutes. I want to talk about the self, being aware of the self and the difference between self-awareness and awareness of a self. So with the state of the world being as it is, Socrates' advice to know thyself is essential. Now, it's always important to define words and concepts, and by the self, I mean the totality of your physical body and mind, your personality and beliefs, and experiences that lead up to who you are in any given moment. Maybe that's a little vague, but it's okay for the purpose here. Now, we are all aware of when we are tired, hungry, or in pain. We may even be aware we are angry, jealous, confused, and more. This I call self-awareness, and for the most part, we do a pretty good job of being conscious of our bodies and emotions. But how many of us are aware of our biases and their sources, or how we came to hold the beliefs we hold which lead to the choices we make, the actions we take, and the lives we lead? Very few, I think. This is what I call the created self, and for most of us, the distorted self. This is what we need to be aware of. There are good reasons for this lack of insight. Despite the belief that humans claim to want truth and freedom, it's more evident that it's comfort and security that we most crave, since we seldom had that in our ancient history. We are and were deeply social animals who crave attention and affirmation from others. We were all members of a tribe that protected us, fed us, taught us. To be banished from it could mean death. The individual self was perhaps unformed in the deep recesses of time, or at least attenuated. The collective was an earlier evolutionary state. But we still feel the need to belong so deeply that we will lose our individual selves in the process. It truly is a necessity to being fully human to feel a sense of belonging. Now, in modern times, our tribes may revolve around sports, the church, culture. But it becomes a problem when our identities become more political, religious, race-based, and then lead to negative emotions like resentment, hate, and revenge. Tribes, by their very nature, must exclude others, and at their worst, they dehumanize the other. All genocides begin with this step. And in this form of tribalism, we need to believe useful fictions to belong. And with this comes propaganda of the most subtle kind, almost like a mind virus that lives in one's head, undiscovered and creating havoc by manipulating a person's will. This science of psychology has been studied for decades, and it works on most of us most of the time. We dislike doubt, anxiety, and fear, so we dwell in a state of confirmation bias, so we can affirm viewpoints not our own. My point is to emphasize we are living in a world of worsening conditions where awareness of a self is urgently needed. We sit on a tinderbox of bent-up emotions, increasingly present in rising blood pressure, voices, fists, verbal threats, and more, and they can and will be unleashed through weapons that are more than just words. I've mentioned before, I've long been fascinated by psychology, neuroscience, bias, and behavior, and I find it quite useful because it helps me to understand how one comes to their views and behavior, and not expect too much of others. Carl Jung said it was next to impossible to use logic to change beliefs formed by emotion. This saves me time and energy. But it is also deeply disappointing that most humans will never share this interest, as the comfort and security I mentioned earlier is not just fast food and couches and cars and climate-controlled environments, but also emotional comfort. To be healthy, one must choose some discomfort, physically through exercise, intellectually by holding new ideas as possibilities, and emotionally, the hardest discomfort of all. Emotional discomfort is examining one's most strongly held views and being honest enough to see that often their origins are based in fear, but sold as reasonable and rational by outside actors. One can't admit to being fooled at times, but one never wishes to be a permanent fool. Now, my ideal solution to the present path of the human experiment is my only stab at being idealistic, a state of mind I often make fun of since it never takes into account the actual human in the real world. If we let those with outdated views die out and replace them with a good civic-minded citizen raised to think for themselves but also contributing to the collective, we could have a chance. Our children would need to be taught from the youngest age about the mind and brain, about emotions, and how to not succumb to persuasive ideals meant to control. Now, this will never happen as long as there is a segment of the human race that perpetuates their rule with every tool made available through brainwashing, disinformation, and the newer technologies that make this all more efficient. We also have tools at our disposal. Meditation teaches one how little control we have over our ever-arising thoughts. So that makes what we choose to focus on and let in ever more critical. Studying that which I mentioned before, psychology, neuroscience, bias, and behavior, can help us to see clearly all that we hold in our belief systems. Gathering in groups to discuss and bounce ideas off each other is a great way to leave the information silos one often falls into when in solitude. But the real truth seeker is often a lonely man on a lonely path. He must risk the possibility of exclusion from and the wrath of the crowd, losing friends and families and perhaps his income and identity. He has become aware of a self that is vulnerable and open, and if we must discover our defenses, we have to do it alone. I have to admit to being both skeptical and cynical about our chances of avoiding a dystopian future. We are primates, mostly unchanged in very basic ways from tens of thousands of years ago, but also very quickly changing the world we live in. We are clever but not wise. Our brains are legacy systems with different parts competing with each other for attention. And is it all for naught? When technological fakery has eroded our trust so thoroughly that we can no longer trust that what our ears and eyes perceive is even true. How does one even guard against that? But we must have realistic hope. Earlier versions of humans were different. They had much less power to control their world, so they lived in more balance with their surroundings. They had no other choice. We are not going back, so a new man must evolve if we are to survive. A compassionate Ubermensch, perhaps. That man has the power to destroy, but instead channels that power in creative ways. He understands his flaws, his biological artifacts he and all must live with, and becomes a kind of hacker of the self, using technology to also help. It's a long shot, but what other choice do we have? So, if you're here at the end, I appreciate it. Give it a like. Give me a comment back. Love to hear from you guys. I'll be doing a lot of just quick, spontaneous videos too. Have a great day. Peace.